So I'm sure you guys have heard of the classic way how to tell if your date is an asshole is that you bring them, to a nice restaurant or something, whatnot, and then when the waiter comes over, if they're a complete asshole to the waiter, that's how you know that that person is an asshole and that they're fucked up and they're someone that you don't want to be with. And the reason for that is because that person, inherently the waiter is in a lower position of power, right? It's like, it's the whole American phrase. I don't know if it's American, but it's the whole phrase of the customer is always right. Like that's the mentality that corporations have in America. Well, really, it's because the fucking corporations don't directly have to deal with the customer most often, or at least the low base customer, right? They have to deal with the higher end base customers, right? Like the deals in which, you do a deal through distribution so that you can get your food costs down, or, you make big moves, right? You don't deal with the little customers and stuff. But the point is that everyone wants to feel a little bit powerful, right? Like everyone wants to feel like they're in a position of authority, right? Like how great would it be to be your own boss, right? You don't have to answer to anyone and you can get your own income yourself. Everyone wants a little fuck you money, right? That's what Riot is trying to give you essentially. They're trying to give you a little bit of fuck you money, right? So they're giving it to the support, right? Yeah, supports, go ahead. Deal an insane amount of damage. They give a little fuck you money to tanks, and they say, tanks, yeah, go ahead and deal a whole bunch of damage. Bruisers, deal all the damage that you want while also being tanky. So they give everyone all the things that they want. And this is how you kind of basically have a runaway greenhouse effect, I would like to say, right? And Riot is the greenhouse gas and you're fucking planet Earth. And then there's Mark Merrill that is Elon Musk that is just going to go to Mars, right? So but let's talk support, because support is one of the biggest defenders along with tanks, and that really in this day and age in the current iteration of League of Legends, there's basically no need for a healer because, which is a subset of enchanters, but it's because there's so much healing in the game already. Why would you need a healer on your team when you could just get a bloodthirster or you could just get a gore drinker? So really, they've kind of eliminated an entire subset of a class, and they've then injected like the more like fun supports, right, of dealing damage and stuff, and they've given them a ton of damage. And I think it's partially because they want to have the player feel like they have a lot of agency in determining on if someone can win the game. And everyone wants to feel like they're contributing in beating the enemy, right? It's not only did I beat that guy, the enemy, but I also helped my team by doing so, right? That's different from being an enchanter or being someone that, is someone that peels or something. Like say you're a tank and you're just there for the front line and you're soaking damage. That feels different because it doesn't feel like you're beating the enemy. It just feels like you're helping the team, and that's it. And so there is a less amount of glory in that, right? Like it's just like all the people, in all the great wars or whatnot, they don't really get any fucking glory by like being on the defensive. Usually it's the people that are on the offensive that get all the glory, right? And so I like to make this akin to what Riot is doing to the car industry. Yeah, y'all know I had to fucking go there. And that, did you guys know that Porsche is famous for, or infamous on the down low, of being accused of actually giving some of their cars less horsepower and, like less 0 to 60 and quarter mile times, etc., from their flagship car, which is the 911, right? It's like the great Porsche that you can get. It's the best Porsche. And then if you want to go a step above that, you get the 911 Turbo, right? And then if you want to go above that, you get the GT3 or the GT2, right? Which is essentially it's a turbo GT3 car, which is pretty fucking sick. But they're accused of lowering the horsepower of their other flagship car, which is the Cayman. So here's a little car lesson for you guys for Porsches. That all 911s are, they call it the Carrera, right? It's a Carrera 911, and that means that the engine is in the back. Now, a Cayman is their other type of car. It looks relatively the same, right? You guys know what I'm talking about, the two-door Porsche. Well, that engine is actually in the middle of the car, right? It's not like literally in the middle of it, but it's pushed more forward from the back end. So, and that means, and a lot of like cars and high-end cars ended up realizing that this is the most optimal engine placement that you can do in a car, because that moves the center of gravity towards the center, right? This is why Ferraris have the engine like in the middle of the car, right? It's called a like a mid-engine car, and that's technically better than the Carrera, but they keep the horsepower numbers down because that's their flagship car. So this is inherently what Riot is doing. Is they're not taking away from another type of car, right? Another type of class. They're giving that class an extra boost, right? And they're still keeping everyone kind of relatively at the same level. And so this is how you get things that snowball out of control, essentially. And if all classes can deal significant amount of damage, the only way up is eventually you get to burst damage, right? Because like clearly you aren't going to have a crazy amount of damage that is also sustained damage, right? Because then that would just be burst damage, but it's also sustained damage, and that would just be incredibly OP, right? Just imagine having, a Jhin, for instance, that can also have fast attack speed and isn't locked out from reloading. That would suck, right? It's like Riot are trying to go from like weed to cocaine, right? Like it's just getting more and more, and they have to get like more of a crazy dopamine hit, right? Not that I wouldn't know anything about weed or cocaine. Maybe that's a story for another day. But Riot even tried to introduce a dragon which helped kill tanks, right? Chemtech Drake, and the fact that it had a HP percent burn, I think it was, to where destroyed tanks essentially. And then on the injection of more damage with the souls, and also just the Drake elemental Drake setup to begin with anyways, and how you get like a crazy spike when you get the soul, or even with the Elder Dragon, and the fact that you get a buff that fucking kills people instantly, right? Like they're introducing way more damage into the game, just in all different aspects, because they want to give you that instant burst, and they're rather quickly going up to that particular aspect. And what I think Riot is thinking is that damage is agency, but no, it's not agency. Damage is not agency, because they're thinking, if you give everyone the ability to do damage, that means you give everyone the ability to carry. But I think that is a misinterpretation of what agency actually is, because if you raise the skill floor, right? And we're not going to use the word skill, but if you raise the floor of damage all the way up, all that means is that if you're a support, you're still going to lose the 1v1 anyways against an assassin or, whomever. But it's just that it feels like you're doing something. It feels like you're doing damage, etc. Now, this has real ramifications in team fights, essentially. Because I want to say like every class or every role feels like ADC at this point. And what I mean by that is that if you misposition at any given point, you die. And it feels like that in every single role because every single role is incredibly squishy. And that's tanks included as well. You can't even misposition as a tank anymore, or else you get fucking burned hard. And it was in the past before that you could misposition quite egregiously and you would still be super okay. But now you have some wiggle room a little bit, but not much, not as much as you used to have. And so at the end of the day, what it's become is who can use their abilities first? Who can use their abilities, which are now more burst damage? Who can use those in order to catch out someone that is mispositioned, even though, as I said, they really wouldn't have been mispositioned a couple seasons ago. And so what this does is it creates more volatility within the game. And it says, essentially, that you will be punished for any small misposition that you do, no matter what role or what class or what champion that you're playing. And that makes it to where there's more variance within the game. And what Riot is classically doing currently is they're creating more variance within the game to where now you don't have as many secure ways as to win the game. You just have way more variance because everyone can burst everyone else. And if I wanted to play a fucking reactionary speed game like that, I would go and play an FPS, right? Or I would go and play a fighting game. That's what League of Legends is not about, who has the fastest reaction and who can use their reaction speed in order to punish someone that is slightly mispositioned, no matter their role, by the way. So at the end of the day, Riot wants every role to be able to do everything. They want a fighter that can also burst you, that can also tank, and that can also peel. Like they want everything in every role. And I think that's wrong. I think that's not what this game was all about to begin with. You kind of figured out your role, you figured out exactly what role that you like to play, and you like the archetypes that are within that role, right? You like the subclasses in that role. And I think too, you also notice that Riot are also trying to cover the weaknesses of roles or of specific champions. One of the most egregious things that I can think of is the introduction of Zhonya's and the fact that it will, and also stopwatch as well too. That's even more egregious. But Zhonya's in the beginning, and how essentially it gives a stasis, and it's usually bought on mages, and it allows a mage to buy time for their team in order to rally around him, and it can bait out certain spells and not get bursted and whatnot. So as a protection, it's the same thing with Crown of the Shattered Queen. It gives control mages an ability to cover their weakness, which is to get completely bursted and shut out of the game. And those classes shouldn't get a get out of jail free card, which is exactly what Riot are doing. They're allowing items to be a get out of jail free card. And they want every class to be able to do everything. And I don't think that's the way how you should develop a game. There should be clear weaknesses of a particular class, and we should all know the rules about what those weaknesses are so that we know our clear win conditions as, you know, to what they are, to keep the game a little bit more streamlined. And I like to make the analogy at the end of this, which is it's like Riot are trying to find full stack programmers, right? And the fact that essentially, if you guys don't know what a full stack programmer is that someone that can be a programmer for the front end, right? So like it's the interface that you see and all of that. And then they want someone in the back end, someone that deals with the systems and, you know, and then on top of that, they want you to know fucking Python and JavaScript and Java and C++ and C# and Lua and all this shit, right? So they want that, but they want that in their gamers, right? They want their gamers to be able to do everything possible and to feel like they can do everything possible. And I just feel like that's not healthy for the game. And that's certainly not healthy for the people that maybe want to know exactly, you know, what their identity is as far as, who they're playing and who they're playing against.